I never thought retirement would lead me to courtroom battles with a neighborhood HOA, but here we are. My name's Robert, I'm 62, a Vietnam-era Army brat turned machinist. And after 40 years of grinding shifts, I finally bought the slice of heaven I always dreamed of, a quiet piece of wooded land outside town. For me, it wasn't about luxury. It was about peace. My wife, Linda, and I planted a little garden, built a fire pit for the grandkids, and kept a couple of trails cleared so I could walk with my old Labrador, Duke. My land was private, posted with signs, fenced in along the front, and, more importantly, paid for in full. That was supposed to mean security, but peace doesn't last long when you've got a homeowners association breathing down your neck. See? My acreage backed up against a subdivision run by the most overbearing HOA board I've ever seen. Their president, a slick man in his 50s named Greg, strutted around like a sheriff in a town nobody asked him to run. He drove a shiny black Escalade with HOA president printed on a magnet sign, like anyone cared. At first, I ignored them. They sent letters saying things like, "Your fence color doesn't meet neighborhood standards." I laughed, tossed them in the fire pit, and poured another cup of coffee. My land wasn't in their jurisdiction. I'd bought it years before the subdivision was even developed, but last summer, things escalated. It started with strange tire tracks leading into my woods. At first I thought maybe hunters had cut through, so I put up a new lock on the gate. Then, one Friday night, I heard voices, loud ones. Drunken laughter carrying across the trees. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, Duke growling low at my side. When I followed the noise, my stomach dropped. There were tents everywhere, at least 15 of them, pitched right in the clearing where my grandkids usually roasted marshmallows. A bonfire blazed high, smoke rising through the branches, and beer cans littered the ground. My peaceful land looked like a rowdy college frat party, and at the center of it all, Greg, the HOA president, standing there with a megaphone like he was hosting a music festival. "Welcome to the annual HOA Campout," he shouted, raising a plastic cup in the air. Another year of community fun and fellowship. I froze. Community fun? On my property? I stepped forward, my voice sharp. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my land?" Heads turned. People went quiet. Greg smirked, lowering his megaphone. "Ah, Robert. Glad you could join us. This land connects to the neighborhood trails, so naturally, it falls under our HOA's annual use. We've always hosted the summer camp out here." I clenched my jaw. "You mean you've been trespassing here for years?" He shrugged. "It's tradition. You can't just claim the woods, man. They've always been part of the community." That was when Linda caught up to me, pulling her sweater tight against the night air. She whispered, "Rob, calm down. Don't let them get to you." But the sight of their kids trampling my garden fence had my blood boiling. I raised my voice. "This isn't a public park. It isn't your community space. It's my land. Paid for, deed in hand, and posted with signs you all conveniently ignored." Some of the campers shifted uncomfortably. A few muttered things like maybe we shouldn't be here, but Greg wasn't backing down. He stepped closer, that smug grin plastered on his face. "Look, I don't know what kind of grumpy hermit act you're trying to pull. This event is for the good of the neighborhood. You should be thanking us for bringing life to this place. Don't you want to be part of the community?" I laughed loud and bitter. I bought this land to get away from that nonsense. Pack up your tents and leave. Now, that was when things turned ugly. One of the younger dads, a guy I'd seen mowing lawns for cash, puffed out his chest. "You can't talk to us like that. We've got permission from the HOA. Permission doesn't override property law," I snapped. "Last warning, get out." Greg narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping cold. "You'll regret this, Robert. You think you're above the rules, but you're not. This land is practically an extension of our subdivision, and if you fight us on it, you'll see just how powerful an HOA can be." For a moment, nobody moved. Just the crackle of the fire and Duke's steady growl. Then I stepped forward, yanked the megaphone out of Greg's hand, and hurled it into the fire. The flames swallowed it whole, sparks flying. Party's over. That broke the spell. Families scrambled to pack their things. Kids cried as parents dragged them toward their SUVs. But Greg didn't budge. He stood there, fists clenched, his face red with fury. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he hissed. I locked eyes with him. "No, the mistake was thinking you could walk all over me." By midnight, they were gone, leaving behind trash, trampled grass, and the lingering stench of entitlement. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd finally reclaimed my peace, but the next week, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. The HOA was suing me. When I tore open that envelope, I've expected another one of their friendly reminders or threats about repainting my fence. But no, this was bigger. Bold letters across the top read, "Notice of civil action, property use dispute." My chest tightened as I flipped through the paperwork. It wasn't just a nuisance letter. The HOA had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming their long-standing use of my land granted them easement rights. In other words, they thought that because they had trespassed for years, they now had the legal right to keep doing it. Linda gasped when she saw the papers. "Rob, they can't be serious. That's absurd." But I knew HOAs, they thrived on intimidation. They didn't care if their claims were flimsy. Their game was to bury you in legal fees until you broke. I rubbed my forehead. They're trying to scare us. They think I'll back down or settle just to avoid the headache. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I kept replaying Greg's smug face in the firelight, his words echoing, "You'll regret this." The next morning, I drove down to the county courthouse and asked to see the property clerk. She was a kind woman, older than me, with reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. When I showed her the summons, she sighed. "Mr. Reynolds," she said softly, "these HOA boards, they get too big for their britches sometimes. But if your deed is clean and the land has no easement recorded, they don't have a leg to stand on." I pulled my folded deed from my folder and slid it across the counter. She adjusted her glasses and studied it. "Yep, clear as day. This is yours outright. No easements recorded, no shared access. They're bluffing." Her reassurance steadied me, but I wasn't about to walk into court alone. I called my buddy Frank, a retired sheriff who now worked part-time as a private investigator. "Frank," I said, "you ever hear of an HOA trying to steal land by claiming tradition?" He chuckled dryly. "More times than you'd believe. It's their favorite trick use, abuse, and then call it a right. Don't worry, Rob. I'll help you gather proof. Photos, witness statements, whatever it takes." Meanwhile, Greg wasn't letting up. A week later, he showed up at my gate in that black Escalade, rolling down his window with the self-satisfied air of a man convinced he'd already won. "Robert," he said smoothly, "we don't have to let this get ugly. The HOA is willing to settle. Let us continue using the clearing once a year, and we'll drop the lawsuit." I stepped closer, gripping the fence post. "You broke into my land, trashed it, and scared my grandkids. And now you want to negotiate terms like you're doing me a favor?" Greg smiled thinly. "Think about the bigger picture. This isn't just about you. It's about community. The subdivision loves this tradition, and they're behind me 100%. You fight us, you'll lose more than just money. You'll lose your reputation." I laughed bitterly. "Reputation? With who? A bunch of busybodies who can't tell the difference between their backyard and my property line? Keep dreaming." His eyes hardened. "Fine, see you in court." As he drove off, Linda stepped out onto the porch, her arms folded tight. "He won't stop, Rob. He's the kind of man who digs in out of pride." I nodded grimly. So am I the day of the first hearing. The courtroom was packed. HOA members filled the benches, whispering like kids at a school assembly. Greg sat at the front with a slick attorney in a three-piece suit. I had my own lawyer, Miss Carter, a sharp, nonsense woman with a calm confidence I envied. She leaned toward me before the judge walked in. "Don't speak unless asked. Let me handle the fireworks." The judge, a stern woman with silver hair pulled back into a bun, took her seat. Case 1124B. Oakwood HOA versus Robert Reynolds. Counsel, you may begin. Greg's lawyer stood, all smooth charm. "Your Honor, this case is about preserving tradition and community. For decades, The Oakwood HOA has hosted an annual campout in the wooded clearing adjoining our neighborhood. Residents have used it openly, notoriously, and without interruption. By law, that establishes an easement. Mr. Reynolds is attempting to dismantle years of community use, depriving families of a cherished event. The HOA members behind him nodded vigorously, some even dabbing their eyes for effect. Then it was our turn. Ms. Carter rose, her voice steady. Your Honor, the plaintiff's argument is not only weak, it is deceptive. Mr. Reynolds' property is clearly marked, fenced, and deeded without easements. The HOA's so-called tradition is nothing more than repeated trespassing. They had no permission, no right, no legal claim. What they call community use is simply breaking the law. The judge tapped her pen, frowning. Interesting, Mr. Reynolds. Were you aware the HOA had been using your land in past years? I stood, my voice firm. No, Your Honor, the first time I saw it was this summer. When I confronted them, they admitted it and refused to leave. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you. I'll review the filings and set another hearing for evidence. When we stepped out of the courtroom, HOA members glared at me like I'd burned their church down. Greg brushed past me, whispering, This isn't over. I'll bury you. I stared him down. You've been trespassing on me for years, Greg. The only thing you're burying is your own case. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. Greg was vindictive, and people like him never played fair. The weeks between hearings felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every time I went into town, it seemed like someone from the subdivision glared at me or whispered just loud enough for me to hear at the hardware store. A man muttered, That's the guy suing the HOA at the diner. A woman leaned across the counter and said, You know, you'd get along better if you just let the kids camp once a year. I didn't bother correcting them. It was clear Greg had spun the story. Wasn't defending my land. I was the selfish old man ruining a beloved tradition, Linda. Noticed the way it was wearing me down. One night after dinner, she put her hand on mine and said, Rob, you're not the villain here. You've worked your whole life for this land. You're protecting what's yours. Her words steadied me. But I knew I'd need more than just moral support. I'd need hard evidence. That's where Frank came in. Frank drove up in his old pickup, a camera bag slung over his shoulder. All right, he said. Let's document everything. The signs, the fence line, the damage from their little campout. If they want to play games, we'll give the judge a front row seat. We spent the day taking photos. Broken branches where tents had been tied, beer cans half buried. In the dirt, a garden fence snapped in two. Clear shot of the no trespassing private property. Signs nailed to trees. But Frank didn't stop there. He tracked down a couple who used to live in the subdivision years ago. They told him they always thought the campout tradition was shady. They told us not to ask questions, the husband explained. Greg said it was neighborhood land, but when I looked at the county map, I knew it wasn't. We stopped going. Frank grinned as he jotted notes. Perfect. Witness testimony. Just when I thought we were pulling ahead, Greg showed his true colors. One Saturday morning, I came out to find tire ruts across my front yard. My mailbox was flattened, crushed like a soda can. Linda gasped. Rob, this is retaliation. I clenched my fists, jaw tight, and it's exactly what I need to prove they're out of control. We installed a trail cam on a tree near the road. Sure enough, 2 nights later, it caught Greg's Escalade idling at the gate. The footage showed him stepping out, shaking the fence like he wanted to rip it down, then driving off in a cloud of dust. When I showed the video to Ms. Carter, she leaned back in her chair and whistled. Mr. Reynolds, you just won yourself leverage. Judges don't take kindly to plaintiffs vandalizing defendants. The next hearing felt different. This time, I wasn't walking in nervous eye. I was walking in ready. Greg's lawyer strutted to the podium. Your Honor, my client maintains that community use has been long-standing. Generations of families, Ms. Carter cut in smoothly. Objection. The plaintiff's argument is built on trespassing. We have photos of posted signs, witness testimony from former residents, and video evidence of harassment by Mr. Thompson himself. She clicked a remote, and the courtroom monitor flickered to life. Up came the footage of Greg shaking my fence like a madman. Gasps rippled through the gallery. HOA members shifted uncomfortably, a few whispering furiously. Greg's face turned red, his jaw tight as stone. He hissed to his lawyer, "You said he didn't have proof?" The judge leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Thompson, is this you in the video?" Greg swallowed hard. It appears to be. And do you think this behavior helps your case?" He tried to recover. "Your Honor," I was frustrated. "The defendant has been aggressive." The judge's gavel slammed down. "Enough. Trespassing is illegal. Vandalism is illegal. The court will not tolerate intimidation tactics." For the first time, Greg looked rattled. His smug confidence cracked. As we walked out, Linda squeezed my hand. That felt like a turning point, but I wasn't celebrating yet. I knew Greg. He was prideful, vindictive, and desperate to save face. If he felt the case slipping away, he'd pull something even bigger, something reckless. Sure enough, a week later, Frank called me at dawn. His voice was low, urgent. "Rob, you're not going to believe this. The HOA staging another Campout your land." Right now, I sat bolt upright in bed. "What?" After the judge warned them? Yep. I drove past and counted at least 20 cars lined up. They've got tents, coolers, the whole 9 yards. And guess who's leading the charge? Greg. My blood boiled. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was defiance, plain and simple. They were daring me, daring the court, daring the law itself. I stood, pulling on my boots. This ends tonight. When Frank told me the HOA was back on my land, I felt my pulse hammer in my ears. It wasn't just trespassing anymore. It was open defiance of the court. Linda saw the look on my face as I laced up my boots. "Rob, don't go down there alone. They'll twist this and make you the villain." She was right. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone. Instead of storming into the woods with Duke like I wanted, I called the sheriff's office. "This is Robert Reynolds. The HOA that's suing me is trespassing against 20 people, at least. Judge already warned them. I need deputies out here now." The dispatcher's calm voice replied, "Stay where you are, sir." "Units are on the way." By the time the deputies arrived, I stood at the edge of my driveway watching headlights flicker deep in the trees. Music thumped faintly, and the smell of smoke carried on the wind. 2 cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. The deputies climbed out, hands resting on their belts. "Evening, Mr. Reynolds," one said. "You weren't kidding." "We heard the music from the road." I pointed toward the clearing. "They're back there, setting up like it's their private festival." The deputies moved in, and I followed at a distance. When we broke into the clearing, the sight made my stomach twist. Tents, coolers. Kids running around barefoot while a bonfire licked dangerously high into the branches above. And there was Greg, strutting with a megaphone again, beer in hand. When he saw the deputies, his grin faltered. "Officers, what's the problem here?" The lead deputy's voice was firm. "The problem is, you're trespassing on private property after being explicitly warned by the court. Shut it down now." Greg puffed out his chest. "You don't understand. This land has always been part of our community." I stepped forward, voice like steel. "No, Greg, it's mine. And now you're about to learn what that means." The deputies began ushering families out, parents dragging protesting kids back to their cars. Some looked embarrassed, muttering, "We didn't know it was illegal," but Greg dug in his heels. "You can't do this." "I'm the HOA president," he shouted. The deputy looked unimpressed. "You can be the King of England. It doesn't give you the right to trespass." When Greg refused to leave, I slapped cuffs on him. The sight of him being marched out, red-faced and sputtering, was something I'll never forget. A week later, the case came back before the judge. This time, the courtroom was quieter. The HOA members had dwindled. Many had grown tired of Greg's antics and didn't want to be associated with him anymore. The judge's tone was icy as she addressed the room. "Mr. Thompson, this court gave you clear warning. Yet you deliberately organized another campout on private property. Not only does this destroy your case, but it opens you to criminal charges. Greg's lawyer tried to interject, but she cut him off. Save it. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, Mr. Reynolds is entitled to damages for trespassing, property destruction, and harassment. Mr. Thompson, you will personally pay his legal fees. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Greg sat frozen, his jaw slack. The judge wasn't finished. And one more thing. The sheriff's office has filed a separate case for criminal trespass and vandalism. You will answer for that as well. I couldn't stop the smile tugging at my lips. After months of stress, sleepless nights, and intimidation, justice had finally landed. After the hearing, Linda squeezed my hand so tight it almost hurt. Rob, it's over. You did it. Frank clapped me on the back. Told you guys like him always bury themselves. As we stepped out into the sunlight, I looked back at the courthouse one last time. The building stood tall and solid like the truth itself, unmoved by Greg's bluster. Back home, I walked the trails with Duke. The air smelled clean again. The kind of fresh, pine-laced scent that makes you believe in second chances. No tents, no trash, no shouting voices. Just peace. I built a new gate across the trail, stronger than the last. With a fresh sign, private property, trespassers will be prosecuted. But this time, I had something stronger than a sign. I had the law on my side, and a ruling that proved it, as the sun dipped below the trees. I sat by the fire pit with Linda, the grandkids running circles around Duke. She leaned against me and whispered, "Worth the fight?" I smiled, watching sparks float into the twilight. Every damn bit of it. And for the first time in months, I believed it. The HOA had tried to steal my peace. Instead, they handed me the sweetest victory of all. This story is just the beginning. There is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey.